It's 10 a.m. in Washington, D.C., and two diplomatic officials are meeting. One came from the embassy of Slovakia, the other from the embassy of Slovenia. Every month, these two meet to exchange mail that was wrongly addressed to the other due to the similarity of their country names. Across the world, embassies of both these nations likely have the same issue, and there are even reports of some less attentive tourists accidentally booking flights to the wrong vacation spot for the same reason. In a more serious note, back in 2004, then Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi attended a news conference in Rome together with Anton Rop, the Prime Minister of Slovenia at the time. Speaking to reporters, Berlusconi said, "I'm very happy to be here today with the Prime Minister of Slovakia." One of the many funny moments Berlusconi granted us. Not only are the two names of the countries super similar, but they also mean the same thing. Slovakia comes from the native Slovensko, meaning land of the Slavs, and Slovenia, it means exactly the same thing. It doesn't help their case that their flags are also super similar. Slovenia's flag is a horizontal tricolor of white, blue, and red, with their coat of arms on the top left, while Slovakia's flag is, guess what, a horizontal tricolor of white, blue, and red, with their coat of arms on the left side, a little further down, but even the inside of the coats of arms are similar, with a three-peaked mountain being depicted. So why do two countries have such similar names with the same meaning and such similar flags when they are two unique nations? The quick answer, if you don't want to bother watching this whole thing, is that both names stem from a shared Slavic root, just used by two separate Slavic people by coincidence, while the matching flags reflect a common cultural identity of a Slavic national awakening against the Habsburg Empire, referring to the Russian flag as inspiration. But if you want a more in-depth understanding, keep watching to find out. Slovenia and Slovakia, two small, picturesque countries nestled in Central and Eastern Europe, have a long-standing and often frustrating history of being mistaken for one another. If you ever struggle to remember which one has a coast and which one borders Ukraine, or you've had to Google which is part of former Yugoslavia and which is part of Czechoslovakia, although I guess the name is a little bit of a hint there, you're not alone. Even experienced diplomats, newscasters, even world leaders have made this mistake. The confusion stems from a very specific cause: their name and also their flags, their geographical proximity, and also their shared cultural and linguistic roots in the Slavic world. Both Slovenia and Slovakia emerged as independent countries in the early 1990s. Both bear names that begin with Slov, and both use variations of the white, blue, and red pan-Slavic tricolor. If someone decided to create two fictional nations with the specific goal of causing endless confusion on diplomatic nameplates and Olympic graphics, they would probably come up with something like Slovenia and Slovakia. Yet for all their surface level similarities, these two countries are culturally, linguistically, geographically, and even historically quite different. One speaks a West Slavic language closely related to Czech, the other a South Slavic language, akin to Croatian and Serbian. They're close to each other, only 400 kilometers apart, but they're quite different. Slovakia is a landlocked country located almost in the dead center of Europe. It borders Poland to the north, Ukraine to the east, Hungary to the south, Austria to the west, and Czechia to the northwest. Its central position has historically made it a crossroads of various empires, armies, and cultures. This location also meant that Slovakia has often been pulled into the orbit of larger powers, most notably the Kingdom of Hungary, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and later Czechoslovakia. Topographically, Slovakia is dominated by the Carpathian Mountains, especially the High Tatras in the north, which form a natural border with Poland. These mountains are not only visually striking, but symbolically important, appearing in national imagery and literature as markers of Slovak identity. The country's terrain gradually descends into hills and river valleys in the south, where the fertile Danube Basin supports agriculture and more urban development. Bratislava, the Slovak capital, sits on the Danube River, just a super short distance from Vienna and Budapest, making it one of the few capitals in the world that is located so close to two other countries' capitals. Slovakia's geographical position has had major implications for its economy, its transportation networks. Mountainous terrain in the north has limited industrial development, while the southern lands are more densely populated and agriculturally productive. Now, speaking of names, that brings us to the sponsor of today's video, Delete Me. Have you ever gotten a bunch of spam emails and you don't really understand how these brands got your email address? Maybe along with your email address, they got other personal information like your name, maybe even your address or other important details about your identity. Well, that's where Delete Me comes in. There's a number of ways that these companies may have come across your personal information. Maybe you checked terms and conditions without really reading them. We all do that. Or maybe a company that you use online was hacked. A lot of airlines especially are hacked all the time. And people's personal information is then leaked to these other companies that sell it to the highest bidder. I use Delete Me myself, and my favorite feature that they have is that they send you a quarterly report. And if you're a new user, you get your first one in about a week, showing all of the companies that they reached out to, all of the companies where they checked if they had your personal information, how many removal requests have succeeded, and how many they have submitted. Even in the best case scenario where none of these companies has your personal information, using Delete Me gives you that peace of mind to know that your personal information isn't floating out there. Because the consequences can be pretty annoying, be it that spam that you get on your inbox or something more serious like identity theft. So if you also want to make sure that your personal data is not on the internet, go to joindeleteme.com/knowledge and use the code knowledge for 20% off your subscription. Thank you to them for sponsoring this video. And now let's get back to it. Slovenia, on the other hand, isn't landlocked. It has a pretty short but still meaningful coastline, about 47 kilometers long, on the Adriatic Sea, nestled between Italy and Croatia. This access to the sea places Slovenia at the intersection of Alpine, Mediterranean, and Balkan Europe. It borders Italy to the west, Austria to the north, Hungary to the northeast, and Croatia to the southeast. Its geographic diversity is one of its most striking features. The Julian Alps dominate the northwestern part of the country, and within these mountains lies Mount Triglav, the nation's highest peak and a central symbol in Slovenia's national identity. This is the three-peak mountain that we see on the Slovenian flag and coat of arms. The central and eastern parts of Slovenia consist of rolling hills, plateaus, more fertile valleys, while the southwest includes the unique karst region, known for pretty dramatic geological formations. The southwestern stretch also opens up to the Adriatic coast, giving it a maritime identity that Slovakia completely lacks. Despite the small size, Slovenia is just over 20,000 square kilometers, it encompasses an extraordinary variety of climates and landscapes. In a single day, you can hike in the Alps, swim in the sea, and then explore wine plantations. And these different geographical layouts have deeply influenced their political and cultural developments. Slovakia's central position made it more susceptible to being absorbed into large empires like the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and later made it a logical partner for the Czechs in the formation of Czechoslovakia in 1918. Slovenia's more westerly and southerly position, and especially its access to the sea, tied it to different historical trajectories, most significantly its inclusion in Yugoslavia. Slovakia's isolation from the sea meant that it was more agriculturally focused and later industrialized under communist rule in Czechoslovakia. Slovenia, by contrast, had long-standing trade connections through the port of Koper. Its proximity to Italy and Austria also allowed for greater Western European influence, especially after World War II. Even during Yugoslavia's socialist years, Slovenia was its most economically developed republic and had the closest ties to the West. Beyond geography and terrain, the people who inhabit Slovenia and Slovakia are also central to understanding how these two nations differ. While both countries are relatively small on a European or global scale, their demographic compositions, population sizes, ethnic minorities, and even linguistic characteristics reveal a pretty big deal about their individual identities. Sure, they're both Slavic, but different. Slovakia has a population of around 5.4 million. Slovenia, on the other hand, has a population of roughly 2.1 million. That's more than a 2-to-1 ratio, even though the countries aren't that dramatically different in size. Slovakia has a higher overall population, but Slovenia is more densely populated in certain urban and coastal regions. Slovakia, with its larger population and more centrally located capital, has a somewhat louder voice in the EU and NATO. One important point of comparison is ethnic homogeneity. Both countries are relatively ethnically uniform compared to more multicultural states, but each include historically significant minority communities. Slovakia is about 83 to 85% ethnically Slovak. The second largest group is the Hungarian minority, making up around 8% of the population, mostly concentrated in the southern regions bordering Hungary. I guess that's why Hungary was mad at the Treaty of Trianon. Another substantial group is the Roma, the Gypsy population, estimated officially at around 2%, but some unofficial estimates often place it closer to 5 to 10%. Slovenia is even more ethnically homogeneous, with about 83% of the population identifying as Slovenes. This is a reflection of Slovenia's nation-building efforts and relatively peaceful ethnic consolidation, especially after the breakup of Yugoslavia. That said, Slovenia is home to a few minority groups, especially Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs. They migrated during the Yugoslav era. Many left after the breakup, but some stayed, and they remain about 6 to 7% of the population. Both countries speak Slavic languages, which helps explain their name similarity, but these languages aren't mutually intelligible. Slovak is a West Slavic language related to Czech and Polish. Slovak and Czech in particular share a high degree of mutual intelligibility, which was reinforced during the decades of Czechoslovakia. Slovene, or Slovenian, is a South Slavic language, more closely related to Croatian, Serbian, and Bosnian. It's known for having an unusually large number of dialects, more than 40, given the country's small size. This is pretty surprising. This dialectical variation is due to the mountainous terrain, which historically led to relatively isolated communities. Religion has also historically played an important role in shaping both national identities, though both countries today are increasingly secular. In Slovakia, Roman Catholicism is the dominant religion, with about 60% of the population identifying as such. The church still holds a pretty prominent place in public life, especially in more rural regions. Slovenia is also predominantly Roman Catholic, with about 57% identifying as such, but religious observance is generally lower than in Slovakia. Slovenian society is more secular, especially in urban centers like Ljubljana and Maribor. There are also Muslim and Orthodox minorities, especially among those Bosniak and Serbian minority populations. Slovakia has several major cities besides its capital, including Košice, Prešov, Žilina, and Nitra. Slovenia, being smaller, has fewer large cities. The capital of Ljubljana is by far the largest urban center, and it serves as the cultural, political, and economic hub. Some other notable towns include Maribor, Celje, and the important port of Koper. So now that we understand all of these geographical, language, religion, and historical differences in the two countries' background, let's get back to the heart of the mystery, which is their names' etymology. Both Slovakia and Slovene derive from a common Proto-Slavic root, which refers to a Slavic person. The word is closely tied to slovo, which meant word or speech, and likely carried the implication of people who speak our language, in contrast with outsiders whose speech was not understood, often called Nemci, relating to the Slavic word for mute, hence Germans in many Slavic languages being called Nemci or Niemci. In essence, these early Slavic tribes saw themselves as the speaking people, distinguished from foreign neighbors by a shared tongue. From this linguistic and cultural root came a host of names that would eventually diverge into various ethnic and national identities within the Slavic universe, like Slavs, Slovaks, Slovenes, Slavonians, and so on. The shared origin is why both names begin with Slav, even though the groups that now call themselves Slovaks and Slovenes had already diverged linguistically and geographically by the early medieval period. So let's learn about those divergences. The term Slovak, plural Slovaki, came to specifically refer to the West Slavic population living in what is now Slovakia. These people were part of the early Slavic expansion into Central Europe, eventually falling under the rule of Great Moravia and later the Kingdom of Hungary. Over centuries, the Slovak identity solidified as distinct from both Czechs and Poles, even though they remained without a state of their own for most of history. During Hungarian rule, the Slovak language was suppressed, and Slovak culture survived largely in rural communities and religious institutions. It wasn't until the 19th century, during the Slovak national revival, that intellectuals pushed to codify the Slovak language and create a modern sense of national identity. The word Slovensko came into broader use to describe their lands. In English and other languages, Slovakia became the standard translation. The suffix ia is a Latinized ending to create country names of a specific people. So Slovakia essentially means land of the Slovaks or Slavic land, but with a very specific ethno-linguistic group in mind, the West Slavic people who inhabit the region. And what about Slovenia? Its name follows a very similar logic but applies to a different Slavic group, the South Slavs known as Slovenes, singular Slovenic and plural Slovenci. These people settled in the Eastern Alps and Western Balkans during the Slavic migrations of the 6th and 7th centuries. Initially organized into entities like Karantia, they would eventually come under the rule of the Germanic and later Habsburg powers. The name Slovenia began to take shape in the 19th century, during the Slovene national awakening, paralleling those other developments across Europe. It was inspired by Romantic nationalism and the idea of ethnic self-determination. Slovenes started emphasizing their cultural and linguistic unity despite being divided among the different Habsburg provinces. Like Slovensko, Slovenia literally means land of the Slovenes. Again, the ia suffix is a Latin-style designation. It's common in many European languages. Importantly though, Slovenians refer to their own nationality with a distinct word, Slovenci, in their language as Slovencina. These subtle but pretty meaningful differences help separate them in their own linguistic systems, but they can be very confusing in English or French where the names come out nearly the same. It's worth noting, however, that neither country got to pick its internationally recognized name entirely on its own. Names evolved through use in other languages, especially Latin, which was the lingua franca of European diplomacy for centuries, and German, which was the administrative language of much of Central Europe for a long time. In Latin documents, Slovak territories were sometimes referred to generically as part of Slavia, Slavonia, Hungaria Superior. Similarly, Slovenian lands were lumped under Carniolia, Styria, or Carinthia, depending on the Habsburg region that they were a part of. These foreign labels eventually shaped how English and other global languages came to refer to these people and their homelands. Unfortunately, the resulting names ended up being almost identical in many tongues. The naming confusion is compounded by the existence of other Slavic-rooted country or regional names, including Slavonia, a region in eastern Croatia, Slavia, a poetic or historical term to refer to the Slavic world as a whole, and other Slavo prefixes seen in names like Slavograd, Slaviansk, Slavyan, among others. Many of these are unrelated politically but share the common Slavic linguistic and cultural base, but for outsiders unfamiliar with the distinctions, these names kind of tend to blur together. Something else that blurs together, literally, are their flags. To begin, it's important to understand the origin of the red, blue, and white tricolor in Slavic national symbolism. These colors aren't random. They were adopted in the 19th century by several emerging Slavic nationalist movements. Inspired by the flag of Russia, Slovakia's flag consists of 3 horizontal stripes, white, blue, and red. Near the hoist of the flag is the Slovak coat of arms, which features a double patriarchal cross in white or silver, mounted on a central blue hill with 3 mountain peaks, all within a red shield. The flag's ratio is typically 2:3. Slovakia first adopted a tricolor similar to today's in 1848 during the Slovak uprising against Hungarian authorities. The white double cross is an ancient Christian symbol linked to Great Moravia, a medieval Slavic kingdom which is often considered the spiritual and historical ancestor of modern Slovakia. The three hills represent the Tatra, Fatra, and Matra mountains. The first two are within Slovakia. The last is technically Hungary, but historically tied to the Slovak homeland. The red shield echoes heraldic traditions from the Kingdom of Hungary, where Slovakia was located for centuries. Slovenia's flag also consists of these same three stripes. The emblem that it features is a stylized white Mount Triglav on a blue background. Two wavy blue lines represent the sea and rivers, and three six-pointed yellow stars, arranged in a triangle, are taken from the medieval counts of Celje. The flag's proportion is 1:2, making it slightly longer and narrower than Slovakia's. The flag's origins go back to the Slovene national movement too in the 1840s. However, like the Slovaks, Slovenes didn't have their own state so soon, and the flag remained unofficial. During Yugoslavia, Slovene used a red star and the Yugoslav tricolor. It wasn't until June 1991, when Slovenia declared independence, that it adopted the current flag. This design overlap causes confusion at international events such as the Olympics, where broadcasters have pretty often mislabeled one flag for another, or even UN meetings. Both countries have taken some steps to distinguish their flags. Slovakia added the coat of arms specifically to avoid confusion with Russia, while Slovenia's coat of arms is uniquely stylized and doesn't really follow traditional heraldic rules, making it a little visually distinct. But despite the efforts, casual observers still find it pretty difficult to tell them apart, especially at a distance or in low-resolution images. And so, at the end of all of this, it's easy to understand why people mix up Slovenia and Slovakia. They're both small Slavic countries in Central Europe that gained independence in the early 1990s. Their names are nearly identical, their flags share the same colors and layout, and both feature a three-peaked mountain in their coat of arms. Even seasoned diplomats and journalists fall victim to the confusion. But when we dig deeper, it becomes clear that the similarities are more coincidental than intentional. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to watch each week's video early, as well as access extra content, make sure to support the channel over on Patreon as well. But if you don't want to, that's perfectly fine. Either way, thank you for watching here again, and I will see you next time for more general knowledge.